We're about to begin the services for Mrs. Carol Rae Cohen. I would ask if any of you have a cellular device to please turn it to the off position. Officiating our service today will be Cantor Elizabeth Batsara, Congregation Beth Judea.
So much for you. So much.
Good morning. On behalf of Barry, Stacy, Allison, Josh, and all of Carol's grandchildren, I want to welcome you here. We are here to accompany Carol as she begins her next journey. I'm going to begin by chanting the opening phrase of Psalm 121. Me'ayin di'ayin yavo ezri Eisa'enai el harim me'ayin me'ayin yavo ezri Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim V'aretz Eisa Enai El Me'ayin Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Practice by Rabbi Melinda Pankin. Yesterday, I practiced going to the grocery store to buy milk and eggs. Today, I practiced taking a shower and waking my children and feeding them pancakes and driving them to school. I practice listening to the radio and reading the newspaper and watching TV. I practice going to work and answering phone calls and sitting in meetings. I practice not averting my eyes from the sadness reflected in the eyes of others as they look at me. Some of this I know how to do. Some of this I will learn. I will practice living without you until I find some proof that this could be possible. I will practice in hopes that one day normal can become normal again. Carol grew up in Kokomo, Indiana. Her mother was from Chicago. Her father was an immigrant from Kiev, Ukraine. And that small town never really left her. In her love of fried chicken, in her insistence on family dinners, in her love of road trips, and in her ability to talk to anyone. I had the very great privilege of hearing many stories that Barry and the children were able to share with me on Monday. And I'm sure everyone in this room has stories about Carol. We're going to hear from the family today. And I would first like to invite Stacy to come up and share a few words. I'm told, are we all coming up or?
Wanna come together?
There we go.
Unsurprisingly, we're gonna go in birth order. It's sort of how we did everything. I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. It's my greatest regret. In that spirit, here are some things I wanted my mom to hear before she left. Dear Mom, my entire life, I've seen you staring back at me every time I look in the mirror. To be honest, it drove me crazy at times. That's the constant push-pull of a mother-daughter relationship. It's complicated, and ours was no exception. I mean, you just had to get braces and your ears pierced the same exact day as me. It was so embarrassing. However, I now cherish seeing you in me. It brings me a lot of comfort. I'm unquestionably the child of yours who is most like you, from appearance to personality. Only I could ever outtalk you. What you may not have known is how much I admire your remarkable strength, unequivocal kindness for others, and fearless approach to life. You are so brave, almost invincible. You also loved wholeheartedly. Your body used to physically shake with glee when good things happened. You held my worries so I wouldn't have to. You were my rock, my secret keeper, my backup memory. You are my person. It's already been a struggle not being able to call you with every little thing. I have so much to tell you about the last few days. You would not believe it. But mostly I need you to know that my love for you is endless. I'll carry you with my boys and me forever. That is my promise to you. I love you.
I feel so lucky to have a mom who would do absolutely anything for me. I knew I could count on her for everything, no matter when or where. She was such a big part of my daily life. I just hope she knows how much I admired her, not only for her strength and bravery, but for the way she has always lived her life. She has excelled at all her life roles and has made so many lifelong friends along the way. She lived her life to the fullest, creating new adventures and memories daily. Now that I stand here today, I am comforted in believing I may not need to say goodbye to her. I think her larger-than-life personality, her spirit is too strong and bright to ever leave this world. I think in her own unique ways, she will be with each and every one of us forever. She truly loved her friends and family and would be so happy to see you all here today. The relationships she had in her life is what she lived for. I want to thank my dad, the love of her life, for taking such good care of her. They were so lucky and blessed to have one another. Thank you.
You're good.
My speech is on the phone. There was no doubt that my mom was a dedicated mother and grandmother to the nth degree. What I've been thinking about the last few days a lot is how my mom was such a social butterfly, much as her dad had been. Despite always being there for her kids and later her parents and later her grandkids, she somehow made the space to nurture these other friendships. And by being there, I mean a real, genuine sense of purpose that was not done begrudgingly in any sense. She always had such a large social circle, and her friendships meant so much to her. She made friends easily and maintained friendships over her lifetime. Her friends became part of her family and even further extended her family, as she'd soon become friends with their parents, their children, their siblings, and their cousins. And all those names, dates, connections, stories, she really never forgot. And she thrived learning about everyone's life story. Because of this, wherever I went at every stage of my life, there was someone with a connection to my mom. When I moved to San Francisco, for example, to start my residency training, All the new residents were invited to one faculty member's home in wine country for a welcome picnic. This particular faculty member had such beautiful gardens, which I learned were there because her partner was in the business of designing gardens. So a few days after this event, I was talking to my mom and I told her about this event. And she said, "Oh, that must be Penny's house." Penny, as it turned out, was the cutest classmate of hers in elementary school in Kokomo. And Penny turned out to be from Kokomo. And my mom had learned at a recent high school reunion that Penny's partner was an anesthesiologist. She just didn't know that she worked at the same hospital as mine. My mom's mind was as sharp as they come, but was also always on full speed. She was not someone who would be able to practice something popular and trendy today like mindfulness. She was always absorbed in enjoying what she was doing or planning something in the future. She thrived planning family events, trips, or if she was bored, she'd call up one of her many friends or daughters to chat, a conversation that might go late into the night. It seemed pretty common that my dad would say to her, "Carol, can you go in the other room and talk?" The phone is so closely aligned with her in my mind. She was one of the earliest people I can remember to get a cell phone when it was essentially a small piece of luggage to lug around. While she wasn't generally very into electronics, she was always excited to upgrade to the newest phone models. And even as an adult, she was doing so often years before me. There were times she said she might as well work for Apple for all the time she spent at the store or on the phone with technical support. But being that relationships with people were so important to her, it makes sense that the phone would be such a valued item to her. I feel grateful and reassured that she did live life fully. Experiences and people are what mattered the most to her. I really always got the sense that she had a really fun and loving childhood. She had many fun family trips in Indiana and Chicago. She was proud to be from Kokomo, and it shaped her personality in many ways. She loved high school. She had an idyllic college experience. Sorority girl meets fraternity boy at a freshman year dance. She called her mom that night to tell her that she met the guy she was going to marry. And this was when long distance calls were a big deal. And that marriage lasted more than 50 years and set a strong example to my sisters and I. She spoke about how unhappy she was to move to Willard, Ohio, early in her marriage after Stacy was born. And she was excited to leave for Chicago after I was born. But that didn't keep her from making so many good friendships in Willard and living life very fully there with countless hobbies and activities. You always knew where you stood with my mom. She wasn't discreet about being either excited or disappointed. Anything less than 100% on spelling tests meant she'd be disappointed. She shrieked loudly in excitement both times when Carrie and I told her that Carrie was pregnant. If I cried, she cried besides me. There was never any doubt that she loved you unconditionally. The fine details were extremely important to her, sometimes annoyingly so. But she was unrelenting when it was important to her, and it usually was. As she started to try to micromanage our wedding plans, I asked Stacy and Allison if this was normal. Yes, they replied. They apologized to me. They told me we'd get through it. And they said, you just have to say no sometimes. She dictated how our body positions had to be positioned relative to each other for wedding photos. Everything had to match the photos from Stacy's wedding, Allison's wedding, and even her own wedding. There's a bride wall in her home, and she had very specific requirements of the Carrie's bride photos for that wall. She took an active interest in everything in my life and she could get out of me. She wanted to know the details and had opinions on everything. As much as this was sometimes annoying, she usually knew what she was talking about and her advice was usually very helpful. Some of the memories I cherish most of just my mom and I include taking me to see the Princess and the Pea play, which I was mesmerized by, riding the school bus with me for the first day of kindergarten, being my biggest fan in all my youth sports, despite me not being very good, somehow nudging me to be in talent shows, which was definitely outside my comfort zone, being disappointed at my third grade report card and telling me I need to do better. Given that my dad wanted nothing to do with it, my mom and I would make frequent trips to Popeyes when I was young. She'd get the 2-piece meal and I'd get the 3-piece meal. Summers at Six Flags, she rode most of the rides. A summer spent at Wrigley Field as when we were extras during the taping of a movie about Babe Ruth. And morning stops at Bob's Donuts. She made John Goodman shout happy birthday to Allison.
Oh my God.
Seeing my mom snubbed by Spike Lee when she tried to strike up a conversation with him at a Nike commercial shooting. He wasn't interested in making a new friend that day. There was always a reason to go out for ice cream, eating red licorice, popcorn, always a stash of ice cream bars in the freezer, Luminaldi's pizza, tons of diet soda. Her excitement over ribs and lamb chops, her ill-advised idea that we should take a family vacation to a dude ranch, watching the Chicago Bulls playoff games on television with her shouting at the screen. We called ourselves Bulls buddies. Many trips to watch the Chicago Cubs play at Wrigley Field, walking around campus at Parents' Weekend in college, not knowing what she was getting when she stopped at a student health services booth and shouted very loudly, "Josh, take some of these," as I was horrified that she was giving me a pile of condoms. Changing her contact information for me and her phone to Dr. Joshua Cohen. A trip with me to San Francisco, helping me find an apartment. She wasn't happy walking with our luggage with me through the Tenderloin, which is a rough neighborhood uphill. Once I moved to San Francisco, she'd frequently ask me when I was moving back. And multiple times she would ask her doctors here to help me find a job in Chicago. Multiple musicals we went to together in San Francisco, including Kinky Boots and seeing Idina Menzel in If Then. Trips to Carmel, Monterey, where a dog once took a bite from her new purse at a restaurant. She loved that story, and somehow she was able to return the purse. Playing hearts and spades, playing words with friends, and then Wordle. You could rarely beat her in a word game or in any game of skill. Mom, I love you. You were always there for me. You always cared. You often did way more than what was expected or needed for us. As I navigate parenthood in life, I hope I can follow and mirror the many examples you set for us.
Beautiful. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Stacy and Allison. Barry, do not apologize.
Hi. Carol and I met our freshman year in college, and we were both 19. We started dating, and soon there was a lavalier, a pin, an engagement ring, soon followed. And then after college, we were married, 1970. I moved Carol and our newborn daughter to a town in Ohio of only 5,500 people. She reminded me how often I teased her about her hometown in Kokomo of 50,000 people. And here she was. But she did come with me as quickly. She amassed a group of close friends there, some people that we still keep in touch with. Just like she did in elementary school and high school and college. And she did the same in Chicago when we moved here 10 years later. All her life, she made friends easily. Many of you know her, at least initially, from cards. Carol loved other games as well. She had a wide network on Words with Friends. And in Ohio, I remember she subscribed to Games Magazine, and my boss also subscribed. And when the issue came, they would call each other up and compare how they did. She was very competitive. Both were excited. Carol kept many of these friends throughout her life. I've heard from so many people in the last few days from every aspect of her life who have found out about her passing and have contacted me to express it. She would have been so pleased, and I was so pleased to hear from so many. And friends included her cousins. She was so thrilled to come to Chicago because here in Chicago was where the bulk of her cousins lived. And her sister as well, and her parents joined us here in Chicago soon afterwards. She's been so happy to be close to extended family and be able to participate in family events for the time that we've been here. Carol loved being a mother, and you've heard that from her children. She loved every part of it, including being pregnant, maybe not so much the deliveries. She was strong-willed a mother, as you heard, as she was as a wife. I rarely won arguments. And some of our arguments were about memories she had, and I don't know why I even tried, because those of you who know her well know she had an amazing memory from as far back as remember. She didn't miss a detail, and that stayed that way until the day she died. Our kids, nobody mentioned this while they were here, but Carol came up with a rule, no relocation without notification. That was before cell phones, and they still tease her about that. Carol was a wonderful partner. She was a wonderful mother. She pushed hard to assure children were happy and then that they were educated. She cared about each of us all the time, and she worked hard to participate in everybody's life in a positive way. She loved adventure. She loved to travel. She loved to participate with children and grandchildren's life and her friends' lives. Outings with friends was so important with her. One of Carol's friends told me this week that she loved Carol because Carol was fun. And that's very true. She was fun. The last 5 years for Carol were not so good. They were hard, but she made the best of it. It was hard to travel. It was hard to be in activities, but she learned pretty quickly that if she was going to sit home and be depressed, that wasn't going to work at all. And she worked very hard to make sure that she was stayed in social activities as much as she could. She played Maj and bridge and canasta all week long. And she loved that. And she loved getting together with her friends. And she loved going shopping. And so many people were wonderful to her and took her shopping, took her, made sure that they accommodate her when times were getting hard. She her family and her friends kept her going as times got hard, and she definitely was a fighter, and she was proud of being a fighter. She lived for every day. She planned for the future. She looked forward to each coming event, even though she knew that she might miss that goal. It might be a little too far for her. Since her diagnosis, she was able to attend our Josh's wedding, welcome 2 new grandchildren to our family, attend our oldest grandchild's bar mitzvah. She was so grateful. I will miss her so much. So thank you for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry, for those beautiful words. Thank you. I'm going to continue with Psalm 23. The translation, I believe, is in your flyer. Adonai roi lo echsad min odeshe yarbitzeni al mi menuchot al mi menuchot inaleni. נפשי שובב ישובב, ינחני ומגלה צדק, ינחני ומגלה צדק, למען שמו. Tzal mavet lo ki ata imadi shivtecha u'mishpatecha imadi chamuni. Taruch lefanai shulchan nagad zorai dishanta vashaman roshi kuisiri vayam Chesed Koyimei chayai v'shavtim b'veit Adonai yami. Adonai roi lo echsad. Adonai roi lo echsad. Please join me inside your pamphlet. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I have only one memory to add to everything beautiful that you guys shared because it stuck with me so. She took them trick-or-treating to Michael Jordan's house and asked if he could come out and see them. I feel very deeply each person's life has a Torah, has a thing to teach us. Carol loved deeply and was deeply loved. And her children knew she had their back. They said to me, you could have called her up in the middle of the night and she would have dropped everything and been there for you. And we should all have somebody that caring and that loyal in our lives. And what a blessing that you all did. And that you all did. I'm going to ask you to please rise as we turn to El Male. This is a prayer which speaks of the soul making its next journey and resting in God's protecting shadow. El male rachamim, shochen bamromim, hamzim menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tohorim, kezohar et nishmot Rae Cohen, שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה, ענה בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולם. את נשמתה, אדוני נחלתה, ותנוח משלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
Friends, this concludes our service here in the chapel. The interment service will take place immediately at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Shiva will be held this afternoon from 1 p.m. until 7 p.m. at the Sterner Residence, 1155 Willow Lane in Northbrook. That's cross streets. Those cross streets are Lee Road and Walters Avenue. For those of you online, that's available on our website. For those of you who are present, that's available on your folder for the service. Memorial contributions can be made to the American Lung Association, 55 West Wacker Drive, Suite 1150 in Chicago. That's www.lung.org. Donate. That information is also on your folder. For those of you online, that information is available on our website. We're going to be going procession to the cemetery. Please obtain an orange funeral safety sticker from one of our staff. There'll be flags which will also be placed throughout the procession. Would ask that you please turn on your bright headlights and your hazard lights to make things as safely to get us there as safely as possible. We also ask you to please drive as closely as safety permits to the individual in front of you, especially as we go through the intersections. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to rise. I'm going to invite the pallbearers to the front. Pallbearers Barry Sterner, James Hogan, Astra Jewel, Lisa Nidos Bansgard, Lance Cohen, Jackson Sterner, Jack Hogan, Reed Sterner, and Charlotte Hogan. Pallbearer is going to ask you to please follow the casket until we get outside, 2 by 2. 2 by 2. We're going to go in procession.